and welcome to our app.ducx tutorial video on advanced user interface design. This time we're going to show you how to create a custom control for your software component using the open source library JQuery and the basic tools that are provided by Fabasoft app.ducx and the Eclipse platform. The first thing that you need when creating a custom control within your app.ducx project is an instance of the object class control JQuery. You can create this instance in any .ducxom file within your app.ducx project that you like. For instance, I created it in an OM file called colorpicker.ducxom. Now you see that this is an ordinary instance definition which has a few assignments which specify initial properties of your JQuery based control. The first property that we see here is the control initial label position, which tells the runtime system later where to initially place the label for this control. The second assignment tells the runtime system for which data types or which types of properties this control may be valid. Now in our case we just want the control to be usable for string properties, but this could also be integer, datetime, or any of your custom user-defined data types. And the third assignment that we see here specifies which additional files within your app.ducx project make up your control. Now the most important thing here is to specify at least one JavaScript file which contains the implementation of your JQuery based control, but you can reference as many image or CSS files or HTML files that you want and can then later on refer to those files from your JavaScript file. Now let's focus on the JavaScript file that I mentioned before, this render.js file. As you can see, this file is provided here within our app.ducx project under the resources directory and is called render.js. Now taking a look at this file, here I implemented the basic skeleton of a JQuery control, which looks like the following. It's important to have one function in this file that's called JQuery, followed by the reference of your software component and the reference of your JQuery based control, and then a skeleton which consists of the onLayout function. Now everything within this block is the actual implementation of our custom control, which we're going to focus on later. But for your controls it's important to have this signature and to provide at least one JavaScript file which contains this definition. Now, as I mentioned before, what we want to achieve with this sample is providing a small color picker for Fabasoft Folio, where the users can select a color which gets then stored in the property of an object. For this purpose, our JQuery-based control will render a text box in the Fabasoft Folio web browser client, and then convert the value that the user put in there into something that the web browser can understand, namely a CSS attribute of the text box that the user typed the color in, and then visualize this color. And the VApp engine and the entire Fabasoft Folio runtime system will take care of storing this property in the database and updating the underlying object. So let's briefly take a look at the JavaScript source code, or what do we do here actually. The first thing is retrieving the container that our text box should be put below, and we can retrieve this by a simple call to this function with those parameters. And after that, the container variable will contain a reference to an HTML DOM object that we can work with. Now after that, I create an input element, so actually the text box that's being created in the web browser client. Set a few attributes to make sure that the IDs, the object is unique within the current HTML page. After that, we read the value of the property that is currently stored in the object. Do some type conversion that's necessary for JavaScript to be able to work with the value that we get that is being provided here. And then set the value attribute of our text box, so that the value that we receive from the object gets displayed within the text box. Now I call a function that I've written myself, which is called updateColor. It's implemented down here, and it does nothing special except it reads the value property of the input element that it gets passed in as a parameter, and then updates the CSS attribute background color of the element that we provided it. So it tries to read the property, the text that's actually stored in the text box that we pass in as a parameter, and then sets the CSS value background color to the text value of the text box. So after we updated the background color value of our text box, we continue with the code up here. And the next important thing that we do is registering a key listener on the text box so that our function, which implementation you can see here, gets called every time the user types something in the text box. Now every time the user does this, we want to update the value of our control so that the value that will be persisted in the object by the VApp engine gets actually updated by what the user put in the text box. And after that we want to update the text box again with the color that the user might have put in. So that's the kind of dynamic callback in JavaScript that's being executed whenever the user types something in our text box. So after we registered that and created this function, there's just one little thing to do, namely append our input element to the container that we retrieved up here, so that the text box gets actually put into the Folio web browser client and is being displayed by the web browser. So now that you saw the JavaScript implementation of our control, I just quickly want to show you how we integrate that into our app.ducx project. So I switch back to my object model file, where we saw the control definition before. And to be able to use this control in an actual sample, I created a small object class called colorPickerTest class with one property of the type string, which we're going to assign our control to later. Additionally, I want the value of this property to be initialized with a valid color. So that's going to be the color RGB code of the color red. So every new object will have the color attribute set to red initially. Now with that code we could create a new instance of the colorPickerTest class and play around with the color attribute, but we wouldn't see our custom control yet. So the last thing that we have to do before we can actually take our implementation for a test drive is switching to a user interface file and creating a form and a form page for which we're going to use our custom control for the attribute that I described before. So here you can see the form color picker and the form page color picker. On the form page I want to display the name of the current object and the color attribute. The name will be displayed with its default control, and the color picker the color attribute that you can see here will be displayed with our color picker control. Note that this assignment here, or this reference, tells Fabasoft app.ducx to use your control, which you created before, to display the property, the value of this property. After we created our form and form page and assigned the properties to it, the last thing that we have to do is assign our form to our test class. And after that we can compile and upload the app.ducx project to our Fabasoft Folio installation. After the app.ducx project has been successfully uploaded to our Fabasoft Folio installation, you can finally see our color picker in action. For that I'll create a new object of the class colorPickerTest class and place it here on my desk. Now when opening this object, you see the property color, and you see that the background color of the text box that contains the color value is initially red because we provided the string as the initial value of the color property. Now whenever I modify the value of this property, you can see that the background color changes. Now you see that every time the value is changed in the text box, the background color of the text box is updated. And when I click next to save the changes I made to this object and open it again, and the next time I open the object again, we see the value that I placed in before. All of the sample code that you saw here will be placed on our public Subversion repository for further reference and for you to play around with it. And on our webpage, you can find a tutorial on how to check out app.ducx sample projects from this public subversion repository. Additionally, you find a series of blog entries on JQuery Controls on our webpage, where this topic is being covered in a lot more detail, and where also the technical parts are being explained a little more. And last but not least, you can not only use this technology when creating Fabasoft Folio cloud apps, but also when creating software components for Fabasoft Folio or the Fabasoft eGov-Suite.